Well, good evening to each one of you. I know some of you from a long time and a few of you from the last week, and most of you, of course, I don't know, but it's good to meet you, and I wish it was possible to know more about each one of you. Thank you, Pakwa, for the invitation to join you in BGST for the week and to get to know your good students, and it's been a great gift to me to be part of your life for even a few days here. Well, a beginning. Glories and shames, that is my city, Washington, D.C., the city in which I live and move and have my being. I wish it was all wonder, glory to glory to glory, but that's not it. There's monumental majesty, there's architectural and historical remembering of America's best hopes, and yet, there's also myopia and vanity, legislative injustice and political self-deception at every turn. I sigh over that, and perhaps you do too. It is a city, like all capital cities of the world, where politics is politics, where education is education, where the arts are the arts, and of course, where business is just business. But is that possibly true? Or is its reason for being about something more? In fact, is there something more? Is there something more that matters more? One of the greatest thinkers in human history was a Frenchman of the 17th century, Blaise Pascal. At one and the same time, a mathematician, a physicist, an inventor, and a philosopher, who was known for his cut-to-the-chase arguments about things that matter most. For example, his wager on the meaning of life, on the very meaning of meaning. What if there is a God in the world whose word forms the universe, not only its most cosmic and universal meaning, but for the meaning of ordinary life, for ordinary human beings under the sun, speaking into ordinary life of ordinary people in ordinary places? But to press the point, has God spoken about the way business is to be done? About the very meaning of the marketplace? About the nature and character of vocations in the marketplace? Quite handily, without a blush, we speak about the purposes of business, about corporate mission, and we should if we're going to stay in the world of our work very long. But in reality, the idea of vocation, in fact, the word itself, vocation, is not very far from either purpose or mission, speaking as it does of who and why and how, of who we are and of why we are, and of how we will live into the years of our lives. Gathered together in a room like this tonight, every corner of the city of Singapore, by confession, we believe that the Christian vision of life and all of reality is true to the way the world really is. To put it in other terms, we believe that there is a grain to the universe, a very grain of the universe. That there's a way in which the world is to be lived, believing that its ordering of the cosmos is true, and to our blessing and to our curse, we will live into its meaning. The world is not, in the honest sense, a whatever world. From our most personal relationships to our most public responsibilities, we long to make sense of making sense. What is the business of business anyway? Following my studies through several degrees into the first decades of my life, we moved to Washington, D.C., where I began years of teaching of a truer political vision of life, working with gifted, serious students from all over America and beyond, whom we engaged in every creative way with a vision for political vocation, of learning to think about the public square. We worked hard at our work, remembering day by day the hard-won wisdom of Lord Bismarck, the German chancellor of the mid-19th century, who observed about his own time and place that politics is a sausage-making work. Not very clean, always messy, always messy. And yet, we were born of the hope that there's a deeper purpose to politics than merely push come to shove. That the Machiavellian, I'll stab you in the back before you stab me, it's always a hard-edged cynicism, first and last. But if not that, what? Is there another way? A vision for a life together that's neither left nor right, but born of deeper commitments, of truer allegiances. Is there a word from the Lord for our life in the world? If we listen to the scriptures very carefully at all, we hear echoing across time through every century, every culture. What do I require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with the Lord your God. We understood those words as the words of life, for personal life and for public life, and we will give them serious attention either for our blessing or for our curse. Tonight I want to draw us into a serious, if succinct, look at the business of business. What is its purpose? What is its mission? Yes, what is its vocation? 15 years ago, I was drawn into a breakfast at a wonderful hotel in Washington, D.C. with two executives from the Mars Corporation. Mars is still a family-owned company 100 years into its life. Literally, it is the Mars family. They make Mars bars, but they also make M&Ms, and they make many, many products people buy all over the face of the earth. One of the siblings who owns the whole company, one of the three Mars siblings, asked the chief economist one day, "How much money should we make this year?" I sat down with these two men to talk over these questions, and I asked, "But why a question like that? Isn't it obvious how much money you should make? You make all the money you possibly could make, wouldn't you? Isn't that the obvious, quick answer to that kind of a question?" But that for the next 2 hours, we talked and we talked and we talked and we talked. And I asked more questions of these two people, trying to understand why they were asking the questions they were asking. It was a fascinating time, and over the next weeks and months, we turned this into a conversation we officially named the economics of mutuality. The economics of mutuality. You see, for a family like Mars, for a company like the Mars Corporation, making money requires that we ask questions, more questions than those offered by Milton Friedman in the Chicago school that he brought into being. Have we made the most money we can in the shortest period of time that we can? Well, it's been a long labor of love. For months and for more months, thinking it through, thinking it again and again and again about the real economique of the marketplace, especially, of course, that the world was the Mars Corporation's world, with its global reach from one end of the earth to the other. One evening, a few years into this discussion, we had in our home what we called a vocare evening. Vocare is a Latin word running back across the centuries, not very far from vocal, not very far from vocation. Vocare, though, about calling. What is the calling? It's a conversation about the calling to the business world. We had bankers and business people from throughout the city, more senior leaders, and then some who were on their way too into more senior positions, sitting together over a meal, a conversation with consequences, we called it, pressing in together to understand more fully the business of business. The substance of our discussion that evening was an essay by an American author named Wendell Berry. And he's an essayist, he's a poet, he's a novelist. He's been called the most prophetic writer in American literature today. But this essay was simply titled Two Economies. Two economies. And I will give you the 5-cent version here tonight. But he argued that there's always, wherever you look in the world, there are two economies. Just to name a name, there is the DBS economy. There is the Singaporean economy. Maybe there is the Southeast Asian economy. Maybe there is the Asian economy. Maybe there is, of course, the global economy. But Barry says that wherever you look, there are lesser economies. Every food hawker in Singapore, it is its own lesser economy. What do? They think it through. They make choices day by day. Work out, we will need this. We will need to sell this. We will need to buy this again, to sell this again. And we hope after the course of a year, we've made more money than we lost money this year. Barry calls that, though, a lesser economy, because they are in charge, though, of the numbers which make sense of whether this is a business that can be continued on or not. But Barry also argues that there is a greater economy. And the greater economy is an economy you don't get to choose. It is an economy that you don't get to believe in whether you like it or not. He calls it reality. And he says, in my terms, though, this is the kingdom of God, whether you want to call it that or not. But he says, reality with a capital R in the universe, he argues, is the kingdom of God. And the greater economy, he argues, is this economy which, in fact, every lesser economy has to play its way out, has to work its way in and through the greater economy for there to be actually a life into the world. Much more could be said, of course. We discussed that evening. And these two executives from the Mars Corporation were at our table that night. And afterwards, one of them said to me, "Can we meet him? Can we meet this man, Wendell Berry?" And so I wrote him, and we talked about it, and we decided to fly down to Kentucky to spend a day with Wendell Berry on his farm along the Kentucky River. Spent a whole day just talking and talking, setting forth these early years of our thinking through of this idea we were calling the economics of mutuality. An economic vision which, in fact, required a more complex bottom line than simply have we made the most money we most possibly can make this quarter. We argued, in fact, that for a company like Mars, which wants to stay in business into the future, you'd have to acknowledge, in fact, that there are other bottom lines that exist. We use language which is not unique to Mars, but of people and planet and profit and place. We talked about how do you remunerate, in fact, the complexity of actually the world that really is there in the doing of business in the world. At the very end of our day with him, we were getting into our car, he said to us, "Well, listening to you today, I would simply say this. You know, if you want to make money for 1 year, you ask certain questions, don't you? If you want to make money for 100 years, you have to ask other questions." And I think those words have been etched into our hearts in this project ever since then, realizing that for not only Mars Corporation, a family-owned company 100 years long in its existence, but actually for everyone trying to have a longer-lasting business, well, you see, it's one thing to say, I'm in this and I'm out of this, and I don't really care if I'm out in 12 months or not. I just want to maximize the profit for this year and I'm done. I'm out. Is that an evil, a moral evil? I wouldn't put it that way. But you see, it's a different vision than a company like Mars has, which wants, in fact, to sustain profitability, to keep making money over the long time. And Barry's point with us was this. If you want to make money like that, to keep making money, you have to ask more questions, don't you? Well, we went into years of hard work on this idea, analysis and computation, the most serious academics in the world we brought in, and finally the decision to go public with our conversation about the business of business. Every top-tier business school in the US wanted to become its academic home, but we chose the side school at Oxford University because of its more global reach. We have, over the last 8-10 years, we've offered courses to MBA students there. We've done seminars in the spring and the summertime, offered executive ed programs year by year. Books have been written, notably one called Completing Capitalism, Heal Business to Heal the World, with an afterword by your own Lim Seong Guan of GIC, the Sovereign Fund of Singapore. From its beginning, though, EOM has been a different kind of question, born of a different set of questions. For a family-owned, privately held company like Mars, it is long-term sustainability that matters. How do we keep making money? How do we sustain profitability? EOM believes in a remuneration of land and labor and capital, a mutual value creation view of life in the marketplace. Because you see, it's a serious rethinking of the business, of the very nature of the bottom lines. Most of us know Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. It may come through Singapore and offered in various places here in a couple of months. Most people in the world know something about the story of Marley and Scrooge and of little tiny Tim, don't they? Well, maybe you've been caught by these words as I have been caught in my own reading of the story over years and years. This is Scrooge on that first night, this one night which goes on a long, dark night of his soul. And Marley, who's long been dead, comes to awaken him from his bed. And in a bad dream, Marley is before him and his chains are jangling and we can all be scared of our little people especially. But Scrooge puts it this way, "But you always were a good man of business, Jacob." And Marley the ghost says, Business? Mankind is my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. I wrote an essay about this many years ago at Christmas time, and it went out across America and beyond. And one person who read it was a man named Fred Smith from Texas. He had been the convener of a group called The Gathering of people across America and beyond who would come together once a year, people with more financial resource than most people have, people who wanting, though born of kingdom convictions and commitments, to be good stewards of their money, to find ways to think about, how do I think about what I have made and use it for good in the world? That was The Gathering. And Fred read what I wrote, and the next day wrote me and said, Steve, you're asking different questions, aren't you? Rather than assuming business is just business, whatever we believe about God and the world, that we do our work and we work hard at it for 11 months, then we begin to think philanthropically about it. He said, but you're asking instead, what is the business of business? And with that, are there honest ways that in the doing of business, the aches and pains of the world can be addressed? To say it simply, you want to do business the right way, don't you? Was the way he put it. Without hubris, that is our hope. It's grounded in the conviction that what we're doing in and through the work of our lives is born of something that's true to the way the world really is, true to the greater economy, which is reality, which is the world that should be and someday will be. But this is hard work. It is hard work. And why is that? Because you see, the spirit of the age, of every age, is that what is right. That politics is politics. That education is education. That sex is sex. And yes, that business is business. What else could it be? And too often, people of true faith and hope and love, people born of the gospel of the kingdom, are willing to graze on the peaks of the biblical vision of life, stopping here and there as we want, picking and choosing heroic persons along the way, choosing a verse we like in the Old Testament, a verse we like in the New Testament. In the end, I would say, baptizing business as just business. But you see, dear people, our calling is higher than that. Our calling is harder than that. Instead, we're to be folk who embed ourselves in the depth and breadth of the story of Scripture, in the rich language of the Book of Common Prayer, to read, to mark, to learn, inwardly digest the grand sweep of redemptive history, from creation all the way to consummation. We're to be people who become as theologically mature as we are professionally competent, and that is hard work. But hard work that it is worthy of us because it matters for the flourishing of our cities and our societies. And there are folk who've gone before us in this, whose visions and vocations teach us what this work is like and why it matters to God and to history. Our question isn't new, really. People and places throughout history have wrestled as we are, feeling the force of these questions about the common good, bearing the weight of what makes for human flourishing in the centuries and cultures that make history history. One of the most prominent intellectual leaders of American life in the last generation or so was a woman named Jean Bethke Elshtain at the University of Chicago. Honestly and deeply Christian person. She was a gifted political philosopher, writing deeply, widely, brought into the White House by both Democrats and Republicans. Why? Not because she was going to fan their flame of ideological partisanship, but more because, in fact, she was a very wise woman. She had deeper beliefs about the nature of life and the society together, deeper set of commitments about the nature of the common good. She was an Augustinian scholar as well. And in one of her books, simply called Augustine and the Limits of Politics, she quotes him as saying this: "What is our business in this common mortal life?" What is our business in this common mortal life? Clearly, in the greatest of all analyses of human history in history, the city of God, she sees that as really being the central question Augustine asked then, and in some ways is still asking us now. And as time passes, civilizations come and go, we have honest heroes who have taken on the most complex questions of their days, insisting that faithfulness to God necessarily led them into the messiness of their moment, politically and economically, challenging the spirit of their day, where politics is just politics and business is just business. Yes, I'm thinking of someone like William Wilberforce in his community of saints in 18th century England, committed to lives of ora et labora, of honest prayer and honest work. They lived for truer hopes, understanding that culture and politics are intertwined, that the political economy of the British Empire was built on the evil of slavery and of the slave trade, which this Clapham community saw as an abomination. They were bankers, educators, clergy, politicians, choosing to live near as neighbors so that they might encourage each other to keep at it, to not falter in the hard work that was theirs, challenging the status quo of their day, that, again, business is business and that politics is politics. Instead, knowing that God required more of them, that history longed for more from them. Yes, their moment was one in which called forth the courage of their convictions, the courage of their commitments to what is real and true and right, the courage to call the spirit of the age into question, challenging its authority to deform the cities and societies of the world. Yes, it was hard work, but these good people took up that hard work, seeing their vocations as integral to the work of God in history. Well, much more could be said, but I will not do so tonight. Because of the work that I do, I know that there are conversations like this, even we're having tonight in this setting. They're taking place in Europe and in Africa, in Australia, in Latin America, North America too. And why? The challenges are perennial and they're universal, as human beings are human beings all over the face of the earth. Business and political leaders in Nairobi, social and cultural leaders in Bratislava, marketplace leaders in Oslo, educational leaders in Brasilia, civic leaders in Vancouver, political leaders in Washington, D.C. But for this to be for our flourishing, then it has to be born of deeper commitments and convictions that shape the way we see the world. On questions of war and peace, about the environment, the nature of education, on the meaning of sexuality, about public morality, about the relationship of rich and poor, about the meaning of money and the marketplace. Always and everywhere, the roots of our thinking must be rooted more deeply in the meaning of the kingdom that is now, but that is not yet. Of the world that is, but even more in the world that someday will be. Our reason for being is to be a signpost of something more. That is a raison d'etre for your life and for mine, for your work and for mine. It is a signpost, yes, but you see, pointing the way towards what is real, towards what is true, towards what is right, for Singapore and for the world.